Here we are, guys, in part 13 of this story. What if Naruto was smarter than he appeared to be in the manga? What if he resembled his father more than his mother, both physically and psychologically? Naruto is wise and powerful. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share with your friends. Now, let's begin. Naruto chased after his rogue comrade, frowning at how he was pushing himself. Granted, even he had removed almost all of his resistance for this mission, but for Sasuke to match the speed he was going at with majority of his resistance removed was rather troubling. And he felt a bit guilty for feeling this, but he felt excited. The thought that he might have to use his full power to fight Sasuke gave him a rush that brought a feral grin to his face. For too long he had wanted to have a fight where he could give it his all. He had given it a thought that the coffin that housed Sasuke was part of some sort of process that was supposed to release the full power of the cursed seal. And Naruto knew just how powerful Sasuke was with the seal. He dare say that it would have required every trick in his arsenal to stop Sasuke with the first level of the curse mark, without resorting to Kurama's chakra. But now, he had a feeling that the upcoming fight will be much more challenging. There was quite a reasonable amount of distance between him and Sasuke, due to the latter having an early start. But as he was catching up, he frowned as he sensed the chakra signature stop in front of him. Why would Sasuke stop? Did he know that Naruto was in pursuit? Deciding not to let the opportunity slip, Naruto turned full throttle, rapidly closing the distance between him and Sasuke. His eyes widened when he saw Sasuke come into view, but narrowed when he actually deduced just where the two of them had arrived at. A flash step sent him onto the head of Senju Hashirama, just as Sasuke was once again starting to walk away. Straightening up, he spoke in a normal voice that clearly reached the Uchiha. "I hope you know that I won't let you leave like this, Sasuke." The Uchiha froze in his tracks, and Naruto watched as he slowly turned towards him. Alarm bells rang in his mind when he took in his appearance. Sasuke pretty much looked like when the power of the curse mark flowed in his chakra network, but there was a clear difference. Sasuke's left side was covered in black marks, like before, but his left eye had changed, having a black sclera and a golden iris, which gave him a rather menacing look. Not to mention the sick smile that he was sporting. It made him look very deranged. For a fleeting moment, Naruto's mind recalled the meeting he had with the last person he saw before leaving the village for pursuit. Flashback. Naruto was briskly walking towards the village gates from where Shikamaru had taken off in pursuit. He was currently in the process of gaining the mindset for the retrieval mission. There was a chance that he might have to kill Sasuke, and Naruto did not like that. If it was possible, he would try his level best to bring him back alive, even if he had to break every single bone in the Uchiha's body. The thought of killing Sasuke did not appeal to him. Just as he arrived at the gate, he took a deep breath and let it out. "Be quick in what you have to say, Sakura." He turned around, a frown gracing his features as he looked at his former teammate. Sakura looked terrible. There were noticeable bags underneath her eyes due to lack of sleep, there were tear tracks on her face, and even now, she looked like she was barely holding any more tears at bay. "Naruto," her voice broke as she bit her lip, holding back the tears desperately. She then continued in a whisper, "Please bring Sasuke back. I beg you." Naruto sighed as he looked down, contemplating on what to say. He had a suspicion that Sakura's feelings for the Uchiha were not those of a typical fangirl, but it only added to her misery if Sasuke did not care to return those feelings. He decided to be blunt with her, for if he lied, she would never forgive him. "I will bring Sasuke back, Sakura," he told her with a straight face, and it hurt a bit to crush that glimmer of hope that made itself known on her face, "but not for you." Sakura's lip trembled. What? "I will bring Sasuke back because it is my duty to do so as a shinobi of Konoha. Because I have been ordered to do so." The bluntness of his words caused the tears to finally flow again. She near shouted at him, her words a mixture of rage and disbelief. "Why? Why only because it's your duty? Why not because he's your friend, yours and my teammate?" Naruto pursed his lips together. "I'll be frank with you, Sakura. Hokage-sama has ordered me to get Sasuke back by any means necessary. Not only that," he continued despite the growing horror on Sakura's face, "but Hokage-sama has given me very specific instructions to bring Sasuke back. Regardless of whether he's dead or alive." Sakura put her hands on her mouth in growing dismay and horror. The mere thought of Sasuke being dead at the hands of Naruto. "Please don't tell me you intend to kill him." Naruto pursed his lips. "I don't, but it might be difficult to get him back alive. He left on his own free will, not to mention he's probably being guarded by some of Orochimaru's finest." He turned and started walking away. "I won't get my hopes up if I were you, Sakura. But I won't stop you from praying for a miracle." Flashback end. By now, Naruto had hardened his resolve, shoving the memory of his meeting with Sakura to the back of his mind. He could not afford to get distracted right now. He didn't know why, but a sense of familiarity shot through him as he considered his and Sasuke's positions. It was almost as if they had been here before. Naruto decided to speak first. "Do you have a reason as to why you deserted the village, Sasuke?" Sasuke's answer was detached, as if he no longer cared what Naruto said. "I'm done fooling around with the leaf, and you, Naruto. Konoha cannot make me strong enough for what I need to do." Naruto had to admit that Sasuke was partially right in the regard. With what happened with Uchiha Itachi, the village wanted to keep a close eye on Sasuke to prevent it from happening again. Konoha's history with powerful Uchiha shinobi was not good at all. "Regardless, you are coming back with me to the village, whether you like it or not. My team did not risk their lives for nothing." Sasuke tilted his head, as if he was merely curious. "You think you can force me to come back, Naruto?" Naruto's eyes narrowed at how Sasuke so casually disregarded the fact that lives had been put on stake to get him back. Sasuke continued, "I don't think you fully understand the power that I now possess, Naruto." And it was true. Ever since his seal had been enhanced, Sasuke could tell that he was substantially more powerful than before. He was sure that he could take on Naruto and win, but he knew that he would have to work hard for it. "You sure do lack your brother's resolve." That froze the blood flowing in his veins. In a low whisper he snarled, "What did you say?" Naruto knew what he did was low. Itachi was a sore spot for Sasuke, and hitting it like the way he did was cruel of him. But he needed Sasuke to see reason before he proceeds to fight him. "Your brother got strong inside the village, Sasuke. You know that he didn't need any outside help to become as strong as he did." "Shut up!" Sasuke yelled, but made no move to attack Naruto. "You know nothing." But Naruto pressed on. "Shodai, Nidaime, Sundaime, Yondaime, Sanin, Hitake Sakumo, Mito Dai, Kakashi, Gai, all of these are some of the most powerful shinobi in the world, Sasuke. Do you think that they became powerful by seeking outside help? Make your point already, damn it." "My point is, all of these shinobi are a product of Konoha, just like your brother was. They were not weak, just like your brother. You can become strong as well. Konoha has held me back enough. If that village can't give me the strength I need, I'll take it from elsewhere." Sasuke trampled over Naruto's words as if they hadn't even been spoken. He was sick of this. Naruto was starting to get annoyed now. "You must have dropped a few brain cells somewhere if you think I'll let Orochimaru have that body of yours. I don't care." Sasuke spread out his arms. "If you think that you can make me come back, then I dare you to try." He was practically inviting him to fight him. Naruto could feel his heart beating faster as adrenaline started flowing. This was his chance to really go all out, but he had to be careful. Sasuke knew how he fought, and he would no doubt be avoiding his palm strikes that Naruto frequently used to slap the Hiraishin mark on his opponents, or just any sort of seal. This would be a completely different type of fight, a fight that was based partially on the mission, and partially to see who was the most powerful between them. Naruto had proved himself superior time and time again to Sasuke, but Sasuke seemingly had an edge now. And to be frank, Naruto wanted to drag out the fight simply to pitch himself against the Uchiha, to see where each of them stood. Let the fight begin. Naruto made eye contact with Sasuke under the pretense of glaring at him. Sasuke was about to taunt him further, when he felt himself freezing up. Immediately recalling a similar incident where Orochimaru had done the same thing, the name of the technique sprang to his mind. Kanashibari no Jutsu. Before he could flex his chakra to free himself, Naruto had rocketed forward and had ruthlessly slammed him into the wall behind him, his hand pressed against his throat and holding him up. Naruto gazed intently as he held Sasuke by his throat. That was one of his fastest flash steps, he had to admit. And yet, judging by the lack of surprise, Naruto knew that Sasuke had managed to see him, to a degree. As if he knew that Naruto would do that. Naruto's sense rang a second before Sasuke's knee came up to bury itself in his gut. Or what would have been his gut, had he not jumped back. Sasuke sprang forward to engage Naruto in a furious bout of taijutsu. His Sharingan had activated the moment Naruto had frozen him, and he knew better than to underestimate the blonde. Naruto was fast, faster than Sasuke, but the perceptiveness of his Sharingan allowed Sasuke to either dodge or block hits by the smallest of the margins. Before a rhythm could be established in the fight, Naruto spun a kunai in his right hand and slashed at Sasuke, who mentally cursed and jumped back reflexively, failing to avoid the slash completely, and as a result, a small tear appeared on the front of his shirt. Naruto gave Sasuke no time to think as he went on the offensive. But Sasuke was willing to take risks, it seemed. Naruto was slightly impressed when Sasuke allowed a punch to penetrate his guard, right into his gut. But Sasuke retaliated right after Naruto's attack, throwing a punch and successfully connecting it to Naruto's cheek, sending him backwards. Sasuke coughed up blood due to the force of the punch. The timing of those two attacks was such that each was thrown back by the attack of the other. Naruto threw 4 shuriken at Sasuke with deadly accuracy, which Sasuke jumped to the side to avoid, since he didn't have any shinobi tools for himself. However, Naruto showed off his own ability to predict his opponent as well. As soon as Sasuke had jumped to the side, Naruto was right up in his guard, his left fist slamming into his ribs. Sasuke coughed up blood once more, knowing that even though they hadn't cracked yet, nasty bruises will be forming in the area. And that thought sent him into a rage, knowing that Naruto was holding back on him. Naruto could have easily broken them, yet he held back, and that was insulting. Sasuke's Sharingan managed to predict Naruto's attack for him to avoid it just in time, but it failed to see that Naruto was setting him up. He winced at force behind the 540 kick his left hand blocked, but was caught off guard when his legs were swiped off beneath him. Naruto took full advantage of the maneuver his shadow clone did. Sasuke's legs were swiped with such force that he was horizontal in the air for a moment, which was all the time Naruto needed. Catching Sasuke by the heel, Naruto spun once and threw the Uchiha down, right into the water. He then jumped down onto Madara's finger, watching the splash. Sasuke surfaced in seconds and pulled himself on top of the water. He carefully took note of the receded curse marks. "Face it, Sasuke, you have a long way to go until you can match me." Sasuke snarled at the taunt. "You have yet to see anything. And stop holding back on me." Naruto narrowed his eyes before jumping down to meet Sasuke halfway. Neither gained any advantage due to their mid-air position, except for pushing each other back. Naruto pulled 2 of his special kunai out, one held in a reverse grip and the other in a normal. He then dashed towards Sasuke, the other boy doing the same. Due to Sasuke not having any tools of his own, he was at a disadvantage and was hard-pressed to dodge the deadly strikes. His Sharingan was working overtime to predict Naruto's strikes, only partially succeeding. Not only that, but his arms were aching in protest from blocking Naruto's blows, and the force behind them. Naruto might be built for speed, but he sure wasn't lacking in the strength department. Naruto dodged a punch and a roundhouse from Sasuke, going into a handstand and spinning to land a vicious double kick to Sasuke's face. Sasuke recovered quickly, however, spinning low and trying to trip Naruto. Naruto flipped forward to avoid that, and Sasuke used the momentum from his spin to throw forward a high kick to Naruto's head. Naruto saw that coming and was able to counter it with a high kick of his own. But he got slightly disbalanced by performing 2 counters such as those, back to back. Sasuke took advantage of that and landed a 3-punch combo to Naruto's ribs, following it with a knee to the stomach. But Naruto caught his bearings and blocked any further attacks, catching Sasuke's wrist and pulling his arm to the side, leaving an opening. Slapping Sasuke's other arm away, Naruto buried a fist into Sasuke's gut, making him cough blood once more. As payback for the punch combo, Naruto released Sasuke's wrist and struck a punch right into his chin. The force was so great and lifted Sasuke of his feet for a moment. Sasuke tried to push the pain aside, but before he could do so, a foot slammed into him, once again in his gut, throwing him almost a dozen feet back. Sasuke recovered, however, mid-roll and was back on his feet, just in time to dodge the three-pronged kunai that would have pierced his thigh. Before he could perform hand seals for a jutsu, his Sharingan caught another kunai tearing towards him. He hastily jumped back, his hands starting a seal sequence. Kaden, Gukaku no Jutsu. In his haste, however, Sasuke forgot for a split second, only remembering when the fireball made its way towards Naruto, what the function of the kunai was. Sure enough, Naruto flashed to the last kunai he had thrown, and shunpoed to land a flying kick right in Sasuke's face, who had just landed on the ground. The kick sent Sasuke flying further back, sliding on the water. Sasuke grunted in pain as he flipped onto his feet. This fight really wasn't going in his favor. His blows were doing jack to Naruto, while the other's blows were slowly wearing him down. Either Naruto had some armor on inside the uniform, or the Kyuubi was healing the damage from Sasuke's blows, or the guy just had really high pain tolerance. Flashing through seals, Sasuke had electricity crackling in his hands. Chidori. Grinning maniacally, he dashed forward, fully intending to drive the lightning blade through Naruto. Although a part of him knew that Naruto would have a definite counter to him. Sure enough, Naruto dashed forward himself, a Rasengan appearing in his instantly. Both of them clashed and the force expelled was such that water swirled under their feet and raged around them. Both Naruto and Sasuke were trying their damn hardest to push the other back, and push they did. Both of them were thrown back from the backlash of the collision after a few seconds. Sasuke flipped in the air and crashed into the water, submerging for a few seconds. Naruto was lucky to have landed feet first on the water and was sent skidding back a dozen feet. He stood up in a stance, senses spread in case Sasuke tried to attack from under the water. But the Uchiha emerged from the water, heaving deep breaths as he stood up, glaring at Naruto. I really thought the Rasengan would be stronger against that. Guess I'll have to do something about this. He countered my Chidori at full power. Naruto looked at Sasuke with an unreadable look on his face. Then without warning, Naruto flashed through seals. Sasuke instantly copied them, but cursed the fact that he wasn't able to achieve the effect Naruto did. Clearly, this wasn't the full sequence. 2 drills of water sprang on his sides and barreled into him. He was able to avoid one, but the other crashed into him and sent him flying onto the bank rather painfully. Sasuke coughed as his chest screamed in protest. That really hurt. I can't copy his jutsu if he's not using the full sequence, and he knows that. Worse, I don't know water or air manipulation. In his pain, Sasuke failed to take notice that a Hiraishin kunai was buried right behind him. Naruto had thrown it right when Sasuke had crashed on the ground, to prevent him from knowing about it. So it stood to reason that Sasuke was shocked and had no counter against the football kick that Naruto smashed into his gut, right after flashing in front of him. The force sent new waves of pain coursing through him, as well as sending him skidding back a few feet. You can't beat me, Sasuke. Not with what you have. Naruto's words caused Sasuke to pause, looking up at Naruto with silent rage. In response to his rage, the curse mark was activated and it spread over Sasuke's entire body, as opposed to one side. Not only that, but for the first time, Naruto's eyes had some alarm in them as he gazed at Sasuke. Not because of the curse mark, but because of Sasuke's eyes. A third Tomoe appeared in both of the eyes. Sasuke's Sharingan had finally, fully matured. Sasuke snarled in response, not knowing about the change in his eyes. We'll see about that. Speeding through hand seals, a horde of fireballs made their way towards Naruto, who neatly dodged every single one of them. He was barely prepared, however, for Sasuke to be standing right where he was, after he dodged the last fireball. On pure reflex, Naruto bent back a full 90 degrees, avoiding the slash at his throat that Sasuke made holding Naruto's own kunai in hand. He didn't have time to wonder just how fast Sasuke had gotten under the influence of the curse mark, because now he was on defensive. He was reminded of the days when he practiced the snake-style taijutsu with Anko-sensei. Sasuke was relentless, but Naruto didn't need to know the pattern of the attacks to deliver a counter. His left hand came up to grab Sasuke's right wrist, stopping the kunai from burying itself in his head. Naruto's left leg came up in a high kick, but was stopped by Sasuke's other hand. Immediately lifting the wrist he was grabbing, Naruto used his free leg to jump, twisting so that his thighs were around Sasuke's neck. Using all the force he could muster, Naruto flipped back, slamming Sasuke on the ground on his front. He flipped back, but was shocked to see that Sasuke had stood up with him, with seemingly no damage. The Uchiha smirked. You might as well give up if that's all you have. Naruto narrowed his eyes. Looks like I would have to go all out as well. With a half-ram seal, he released all the remaining resistance seals that were activated. It was a level 7, so it should make a difference. Sasuke's face soured when he realized that Naruto was holding back on him still. Looks like you have a death wish after all. With that, he put his new speed to test. In a second, he was in front of Naruto, throwing punches, kicks, jabs, strikes like it was no one's business. He put his everything in his attacks, trying to inflict all the pain he could on Naruto. But soon his anger and sadistic pleasure switched to irritation and shock when Naruto countered all his attacks without a problem. He knew something had changed because he could predict Naruto's movements better than before, and realized with a start that his Sharingan had finally evolved fully. Grinning, he jumped back, deciding to switch to long-distance tactics. Naruto was glad he got rid of the last of his seals, because he would need to be at his peak to counter a fully evolved Sharingan that has been enhanced with an outside source. That short, but intense Taijutsu bout had pushed him to his maximum, and had told Naruto that this fight had accelerated to a whole new level. He gracefully flipped out of the way of the fireball that Sasuke shot at him, throwing some Hiraishin kunai around the area mid-air. He had a feeling he was going to need them. He immediately flashed away as the hair on the back of his neck stood up in warning, and it was good that he did, because Sasuke had been waiting for him on the spot where he was going to land. Where the hell was this speed coming from? His hands came up in a tiger seal, and Sasuke found himself bound with chains made up of water. Both of his hands were held away from him, and no matter how hard he pushed, the chains held. He looked up in alarm as Naruto did a snake seal and spat a compressed ball of wind towards him. Sasuke did not want to find out the effects of that jutsu, so he did something unusual for the very first time. He substituted with a piece of rock, without hand seals. He felt the larger-than-normal drain on his chakra, but it at least got him out of the way. The piece of rock exploded with a bang, tiny chunks of it being blown apart by the explosive wind. With a few quick seals, he set another fireball Naruto's way, but the blonde simply flashed away, and Sasuke found himself being blown away by an extremely fast wind. The wind was so strong that he was spinning high in the air, and as such was unable to correct his position mid-air. Naruto took clear advantage of that by speeding through seals once more. Suten, Mizutatsumaki no Jutsu. One of his heavy hitters, the jutsu's purpose was to catch Sasuke in its grasp and violently throw him away with the force of a tornado. The spinning vortex of water materialized in a matter of seconds at the spot where Naruto guessed Sasuke would land. Sasuke's eyes widened in alarm when he saw water spinning below him where he would land. He recognized the jutsu as the one Naruto used against Gaara. Just as he landed, he desperately tried to get away, but the vortex had gathered enough speed that the water beneath his feet spun, taking him into the vortex. Sasuke's head spun as his body was violently spun in the vortex, and then, he was thrown out from it, his body slamming into the rocks and falling down. His muscles screamed in protest as he got up, and he drew even more power from the cursed mark, making his recovery faster, but painful nonetheless. Naruto's eye was twitching in irritation upon seeing Sasuke standing up after what happened to him. The rate of recovery that Sasuke was showing was really getting on his nerves. He knew that the curse mark enhanced the subject, but this was ridiculous. He would have to hit Sasuke really hard with to put him down, it seemed. He was about to do some hand seals when an idea popped into his head. It was a crazy one, but if it worked, it could put Sasuke down, even in his state. It was a plan that lacked any efficiency whatsoever, but more than made up for it in terms of power. And he had that in spades. 6 shadow clones popped around him. He put his hand in one of his pouches and took out an exploding tag. Not just any tag, but the self-replicating one. Time to initiate the first part of the plan. Handing the tag to one of the clones, he flashed away to prepare on his part. The clones already knew what to do, and so they made their way down to Sasuke. By the time they had reached, Sasuke had recovered and was mad like no one else. He saw the clones coming and fired off a fireball of epic proportions. One of the clones hung back and formed a bird seal while the others charged straight towards the fireball. Suten, Suijin Heki. A wall of water sprung up, in which the fireball collided. The fireball turned the entire wall of water into steam, which spread around the area of the clones and Sasuke, who snarled. "Don't think this steam can hide you, Naruto. My eyes can see your every move." To prove his statement, he effortlessly dodged a downward axe kick from a clone behind him. With a near-instant reflex, he slammed an elbow into the clone's gut, dissipating it. Another came from his side, and he kicked it out of existence. 4 to go. He heard them before he saw them, and he effortlessly caught the shuriken out of air, right in his hands. Flipping up to avoid the attack from another clone, he threw one shuriken at it. The clone puffed out of existence. 3 to go. He threw the shuriken to his right, but only 2 clones emerged, and both of them avoided it. He engaged the 2 of them, and unlike before, he had little difficulty in countering their moves. One clone flipped away, while Sasuke took advantage of that and punched the other clone out of existence. Turning around to deal with the last 2, his eyes widened in alarm when he saw the clone preparing to spit something at him. He cut off the chakra under his feet, going underwater just as the clone spit out air, clearing all the steam from the area. Its chakra supply depleted, the clone vanished out of existence. But Sasuke felt no victory, even as he dodged the attack by going underwater, because right now, He was staring at a smirking clone, and both of them were surrounded by a large number of explosive tags. Sasuke knew in an instant that this was a clone because as reckless Naruto was, even he would not attempt such a move in a close proximity. Only one thought went through his mind. Oh shit. All the tags exploded simultaneously, and Sasuke was tossed high into the air, along with large amounts of water. The force of the underwater explosion was so great that the water, and Sasuke along with it, was tossed high up in the air, high enough to be a head above the heads of Hashirama and Madara. Sasuke plummeted faster than the water, and took a moment to rage and lament at the fact that he had so foolishly thrown away his hip pouch. He angled his body to crash feet first into the water, his entire body, especially stomach and ribs, screaming in protest of the abuse he had been getting from the blonde. Once the water had relatively settled waves, but no explosions, he surfaced and looked around, trying to see where Naruto was. Once he was sure that no one was around, he took a moment to breathe. He knew Naruto wasn't gone. The guy wouldn't leave until he had Sasuke with him. Sasuke took a moment to admire the plan that the blonde had come up in such a short time. He knew that this fight was dragging on longer than he liked. Almost half of his reserves had been emptied, but he still was on the losing side of the fight. That thought caused more power to flow into him. He had this feeling that somehow, a higher level of power he could reach if he drew more power. But before he could do that, 4 Narutos flashed into existence around him in the vicinity of the kunai. 2 of them closed in immediately, while the other 2 provided long-distance support by throwing in an occasional kunai, shuriken or jutsu. Sasuke dealt with the 2 clones without difficulty and moved towards the other 2. But just as he engaged them, something about their movements stood out to him. They were attacking all right, but their movements were complementary of each other. Almost as if his train of thought wasn't allowed to continue as 2 more clones flashed into existence, and he was hard-pressed to deal with them. He was so into the fight, that he failed to take notice of a blonde blur speeding towards their location, running on the bank. XXXXXXX. Naruto had flashed right near the foot of Hashirama, ready to put his plan into action. While not one of his best ones, it would get the job done. Simply put, he was going to hit Sasuke with every ounce of strength he had. As soon as he got the memories of Sasuke getting caught in the water explosion, he put the next part of his plan into action. He had noticed during their fight that both he and Sasuke had moved quite far from the statues, far enough that they were nearer to the other end of the valley than the statues, almost 700 meters away. He sent 4 clones to Sasuke's location to engage him and distract him while he started running. He put everything in his sprint, every ounce of speed that he could muster, and enhancing it with chakra. By the time Sasuke and the clones came into his vision, Naruto was sure that he was running fast enough to give a freight train a run for its money. His target was the Hiraishin kunai right in front of him that was rapidly closing in. Just as Sasuke had dispelled 2 of the clones, all the while being on the receiving end of punches and kicks, he saw Naruto speeding towards them, but his track was such that he would run right past them. The guy was not even looking towards him. But before he could move in his direction, one of the clones engaged him, greatly increasing his annoyance. The other clone saw the original running and caught his eye, receiving a nod in return. He knew just what he needed to do. He jumped right into the fight along with the remaining clone and was immediately on defensive, but his job wasn't to attack. He only had a 5-second window to execute the plan. Just as Sasuke dispatched the other clone, the remaining one tilted his body to the side to avoid the kick that would have dispelled him as well. His right palm came to rest on Sasuke's back, and then he pushed. Naruto grinned when he saw Sasuke appear just 5 meters before him. The clone had done his job perfectly, teleporting Sasuke into the path of the speeding projectile that was himself. His right fist came up, glowing with the color of his chakra, further enhancing the force behind the would-be blow, and the plan was well worth executing, because the look of complete shock on Sasuke's face was absolutely worth it. Sasuke was confused just what Naruto was doing running on the banks while his clones fought him. Knowing that this was part of some plan, he knew he had to get rid of the clones, or just get out of the way and dispel them from afar. But his confusion only grew when the clone behind him did not attack, but just place a palm on his back. It all became clear the instant he appeared right in Naruto's path, and saw the glowing fist. Knowing he couldn't get out of the way in time, he had barely crossed his arms in defense when he felt the fist crashing into his already abused arms. Sasuke definitely felt something crack, and tear in both of his forearms. The speed with which Naruto had been running only added to the force behind the punch, and Sasuke was thrown back as if he had taken a punch from Orochimaru back in the forest, only the force had been multiplied some 4 or 5 times. He smashed through a rock as if it were cardboard, crashed into the ground and kept skidding, and smashed through another rock, before coming to rest. All of his pain receptors were screaming, and he could only wonder why he wasn't. His back felt like it had been torn into two, repaired and then torn again. Yet, his resolve did not break. That son of a bitch. That hurts. Where the hell did he bring that punch from? Why can't I beat him? He is always a step ahead of me, and either I fail to realize it, or I realize it and still can't do anything about it. I am in no condition to move. I only have a third of my chakra reserves left, my body feels like it has literally been torn apart. He even hasn't used the Kyuubi's power yet, but I am almost torn apart even after using the curse mark's power. The image of his brother drifted in his mind, his words echoing like a bell. Still as weak as always, foolish little brother. Sasuke's wrists were cracked, if not outright broken. But in spite of the enormous amount of pain he was in, his hands closed into fists. The power of the curse mark flowed into him once more, this time, unrestricted. Sasuke drew every drop of power he could from the mark. He would be the winner of this fight, not Naruto. The power, as if agreeing with him, mixed with him, merged with him. Then he stood up, marveling his form that pulsed with undeniable power. Naruto was breathing heavily as he walked to where Sasuke had stopped after crashing. Sprinting for a long distance such as he did took a lot of breath out of him, but the result was worth it. The power behind the punch, combined with his speed, was probably enough to shatter a small part of the Hokage's heads on the mountain into pieces. He doubted Sasuke's hands were intact. He stopped before the prone form of his former comrade, looking at it with a small amount of pity. His fatigue had finally started to make itself known. "It's over, Sasuke. I win," he whispered. Then the unthinkable happened. It should have been impossible, no one should have been able to get up after a punch such as that. The curse marks on Sasuke's body glowed orange, and then they shifted so that they covered every inch of skin on Sasuke's body like armor. Naruto heard the gruesome cracks, no doubt the repair work on the bones. The skin stopped glowing, and Naruto shifted in a loose stance upon seeing it take on a gray color. Sasuke's hair grew, taking on a blue color and shifting into a form of a mane, much like Madara's. Then, Sasuke got up. Clearly, this was the change in the curse mark that had taken place inside the coffin. Sasuke stared at Naruto, an expressionless face, but the smugness was radiating off of him. Naruto couldn't quite hide the shock on his face, and his expression changed into a morbid curiosity as he heard the unmistakable voices of muscles being torn apart, or in this case, rearranged. There was no expression of pain on Sasuke's face, but Naruto couldn't quite hide his horror when a giant, clawed, webbed, gray hand tore out of the left side of Sasuke's back. Another one followed, this time on the right side of Sasuke's back, and both the arms spread, almost taking on the shape of wings. Only one thought went through Naruto's head. What the fuck is that? What the fuck is that? Kurama and he had spoken on the same time, both of their tones echoing with disgust and disbelief. It was utterly disgusting and fascinating at the same time. Sasuke spoke lower than a whisper, but Naruto managed to hear him. "My turn." Then, he moved. Naruto had flashed as soon as Sasuke spoke, to the farthest kunai he could. He watched, and moved just at the right moment to avoid Sasuke who crashed where he was but a moment ago. He didn't have a moment of reprieve when Sasuke flew towards him, and punched him with such force that he was thrown back into the wall of the valley, cracks spreading out from the point of impact. Naruto groaned as he dropped to his knees. The force behind the punch was enough to drop a tree. The only reason he wasn't puking was because he hadn't ate anything, and that his body was significantly hardened from the use of resistance seals. He had barely gotten up when Sasuke was right back in his face. This time, he flashed away on pure reflex. His expression hardened, and he flashed away yet again when Sasuke converged on him. Sasuke chuckled, "Looks like the tables have turned, Naruto." He then dug his foot where he was, and flexed his newly acquired arm's wings. Naruto chose not to flash away this time, dodging the attack with a simple flip. He then locked into an arm struggle with Sasuke, with both their arms locked. Sasuke was surprised for a moment, but then smirked. Naruto's arms shook as he struggled to overpower Sasuke. The latter pushed him back without any appearance of struggle. Finally, Naruto allowed his rage to show. "You want to do it this way? Fine then." Sasuke maintained his smirk when he saw Naruto clearly struggling. He could maintain this power for 10 minutes at most, but it should be enough to beat Naruto into the ground. He forced Naruto back, but widened when he saw something that he had never seen on the blonde's face. Rage. Sure, he had seen Naruto angry before, but nothing like this. Currently, Naruto looked like he was the type of guy who handled all of his problem by blowing them into oblivion. Then he felt it. Naruto's entire frame was then covered into an unfamiliar, orange glow. It was clearly chakra, and it took Sasuke only a second to place the familiar feeling of malice. Baiju chakra. Naruto squeezed his hands, and it was Sasuke's turn to grimace in pain and struggle. His hands were being squeezed and bent backwards painfully, and something sharp was digging into the back of his hands, through his newly hardened skin. Nails. Sasuke was desperately trying to free his hands from Naruto's painful grip and completely failing, when he was pulled forward. For the first time, he glanced at Naruto's eyes and gave a horrified expression. Naruto's irises were completely red, with a black split in the middle. They were the eyes of the Kyuubi, Sasuke realized. "You're a real pest." The growl frightened him more than he wanted to admit. Naruto's voice had gone a full octave deeper, and when he spoke, it was hard to say who was speaking, Naruto or the Kyuubi. Naruto broke the grip on Sasuke's right hand and punched Sasuke right on the side of his face. With Kyuubi's chakra coursing through him, his strength had been enhanced so much that Sasuke was sent crashing into the wall of the valley so hard that cracks spread from the point where he impacted, roughly in the shape of spider's web. Sasuke shook his head. That strike had hurt more than he expected, but not enough to cause anything more than some minor pain. A roar caused him to look up, and his jaw dropped when a full pillar of orange chakra shot up from Naruto into the sky, and cracks appeared on the ground due to the sheer density and the force of the chakra. When the pillar subsided, Sasuke observed the changes in Naruto. His hair had gotten wilder, with more spikes standing up. His eyes were red, and the whisker marks, which Naruto didn't have since the Chunin exams were back, only much more thicker. Sasuke was willing to bet that Naruto's canines had sharpened as well, even if his lips were closed. He was surrounded by an orange cloak of chakra, which clung to him like a second skin. His aura and posture screamed of power, and for the first time in the fight, Sasuke felt a little scared. "If the fool is so hell-bent on trying to show off his power," Kurama said. "It's only fair that we show him some of ours," Naruto agreed. Naruto allowed a full tail's worth of chakra to flow in him. He was willing to bet that Kurama's one tail contained more power than what Sasuke had right now. Sasuke cautiously took a step forward. Naruto? He never saw the blow coming. The beating that followed for the next 5 minutes was the worst that Sasuke had ever gone through. Naruto was relentless, not giving even one opening, and rained blow after blow on Sasuke. Sasuke tried to use his form's speed to get some breath, but Naruto quickly proved to be much faster than him in his own form. Either he was caught by pure speed, or he just happened to be unlucky enough to be near one of Naruto's Hiraishin kunai. Naruto was literally a blur, and even Sasuke's Sharingan was unable to catch or predict his movements, because they were very fast, and very erratic, not to mention very painful. By the end of 5 minutes, Sasuke knew that he had no chance of winning this fight through power. Naruto had proved that he was way ahead in that regard. Skill was out as well, as Naruto's arsenal was bigger than his own. He had less than a fourth of his chakra left, after which his current form would be gone. His only option left was deceit. And he knew just what to do. Naruto was enjoying pummeling Sasuke with his strength. It served the bastard right. He did not hold back at all, because he wanted Sasuke to know that he was the one with more power among them. He could hold this form for over 40 minutes, which meant 40 minutes of pure beating. But he was willing to give the guy a last chance to surrender. He walked down on the wall towards him slowly, like a predator stalking a prey. "Ready to give up yet?" Sasuke, who was bleeding from small cuts, had various bruises forming all over his body, snarled and sprang upward with the intention of snapping the blonde's throat for good. But Naruto simply flashed to a kunai 50 meters behind Sasuke, in a crouched position, sideways on the wall of the alley. "I can't go on for much longer. This form won't last beyond 2 more minutes, and even that's pushing it. I've used up nearly all my chakra, damn it." He turned around and spoke slowly, in a drawl, hiding the pain from his voice. "Let's end this, Naruto. One finishing move. The one who remains standing wins." Naruto also stood up, spinning a Hiraishin kunai in his left index finger as if he was bored with all the fighting. He rose an eyebrow at the suggestion. "Indeed, let's end this useless fight, so I can finally drag you back to Konoha." The growl was as menacing as ever. But Sasuke didn't let that deter him. He smirked. That's yet to be decided. He charged up a Chidori in his left hand, but this time the chakra changed from pure crackling white to a sort of gray with a white center. Naruto narrowed his eyes, and a Rasengan came into existence on his right hand. The Rasengan was bigger than his palm, and the most curious thing that Naruto found about it was its color. It was a purple, which was rather puzzling since neither his nor Kurama's chakra was purple in color. Perhaps a mix of them? They stared at each other, and both took off at the same time. Naruto ran sideways along the wall of the valley, while Sasuke used his wings arms to fly equally sideways. They were 5 meters from each other when Naruto threw the kunai in his left hand towards Sasuke's head, who just tilted it aside to let it pass by harmlessly. Time slowed down when they were right in front of each other. Sasuke thrust his arm forward, making it seem like it was going to collide with the Rasengan, which was still on level with Naruto's shoulder. He changed the course of his arm, so that the Chidori would not collide with the Rasengan, but drive itself straight through Naruto's heart. This was his moment of victory. His arm inched forward towards Naruto's chest, but Naruto still kept eye contact with Sasuke, who was grinning sadistically. The Chidori would strike Naruto's chest before the Rasengan could meet it. The Rasengan would still collide on his arm, but that was way better than having it on the chest. Victory is mine. Just as the Chidori was about to make contact, it happened. Naruto vanished. Sasuke's eyes showed great shock as his Chidori passed through nothing but air. He was only able to express it for a moment, when an enormous force slammed in the middle of his back, driving him so that he sunk into the rock wall. He gave a grunt of pain, and then he realized what had happened. Shit. He teleported to the kunai he threw? As if sensing Sasuke's thoughts, Naruto said, "That was my flying thunder god, level 2. He then fully slammed the Rasengan on top of him. The impact and the power behind the Rasengan was so great that an entire part of the valley's wall collapsed. The wall cracked and shattered into smaller rocks that came down like rain. Naruto had snatched the victory from Sasuke by a landslide, quite literally. Naruto had flashed away as soon as the rocks had started raining. He watched with no small amount of pride that it was due to his power the wall had shattered. "Don't forget it was my power that you wielded, brat." Naruto grinned fairly. You know what they say, a weapon is only as good as its wielder. The destruction was truly magnificent, if he had to admit. He flash-stepped to one of the bigger rocks, his senses finding Sasuke buried between some of them. He stood with a straight back and watched as some of the rocks shifted, revealing Sasuke, who was struggling to stand up. His back was surprisingly devoid of any heavy bruises. It seemed that the second skin offered some level of enhanced durability held out against the Rasengan. It still had bruises all over though, with a small marking on the middle of his back. He closed the reservoir inside, allowing his own chakra to flow through him once again. His knees were wobbling as he heaved deep breaths. It hurt so bad that Sasuke was barely holding out from crying. The force of that Rasengan was such that if not for his second form, Sasuke was sure that the Rasengan would have likely killed him by destroying his spine. It was a painful realization that Naruto had, after all, not held back against him. He lifted his head, and he was so exhausted that he could not even bring himself to be jealous, angry, irritated or frustrated at the sight. Naruto was standing on a rock calmly, without any semblance of exhaustion on him. Wind was gently blowing around them, blowing Naruto's bangs to the side. Just for a second, Sasuke thought that Naruto looked exactly like his father. Then he vanished again. He appeared right in front of Sasuke, slamming a palm right into his stomach. Sasuke's knees buckled, and he finally lost consciousness as he fell against Naruto. Naruto held Sasuke and gently laid him down on the ground. "That paralysis seal should keep you from running until we reach Konoha." He was about to sit down to rest for 5 minutes himself when the distinct sound of footsteps reached his ears. It was faint, but he glanced upwards and was rather surprised to see Kabuto's face peering down at the valley, coming to rest on him. Looked like he was here to collect Sasuke from him. Ha! Naruto grinned and held up a Hiraishin kunai towards Kabuto, to see if that would scare him or not. Even his right hand came up as if he were about to form a Rasengan. The resident, politely sarcastic look was promptly wiped from his face, replaced by a small amount of fear. He turned and walked away, no doubt to report to his master. Naruto put the kunai back in his pouch and sat down in front of Sasuke's for some rest. The fight had been exhilarating, easily the best and the most enjoyable fight he had ever been in, and he did not regret the hurt he bestowed upon Sasuke at all. In fact, in his opinion, the Uchiha could use some humbling, that the world did not revolve for him. There was a sound of thunder, and Naruto looked up with a smile as rain gently poured over both of them. It worked like magic, for Naruto's muscles seemingly relaxed on their own. It wiped the dirt from his body and face, and the best thing was, that it felt like a reward to him. All the hard work he put in this mission, and this was the reward. The thought of his team flashed into his mind, and a frown of concern crossed over his features. He could only hope that reinforcements from Suna had reached his team in time. So lost he was in his thoughts that his head jerked up from its resting position on his hands when he heard the voice. "Naruto?" He smiled tiredly. "You sure took your time, Kakashi." For once, Kakashi did not have a lame excuse. In fact, he did not have any excuse at all. His luck had been the worst for the last 2 days. The first thing he heard after returning from an A-rank mission was, "Sasuke has left the village to join Orochimaru, Naruto and Sheik." The second he heard Naruto, he had ran out. He had always known that it would always come down to Naruto and Sasuke. He was puzzled as to how it happened. For the past few days, Sasuke had seemed content with his place in the village, and had developed bonds with his peers. So what the hell happened? He had chased relentlessly after his 2 students in a very unfair time frame, hoping to stop it before it was too late. Flashback. Kakashi. Kakashi looked down at Pakun, who ran at his side. "It's up ahead. I can smell the small amounts of blood. I also smell snakes, but not Orochimaru." The other guy. A small relief went through him at the mention that blood was only spilled in small amounts. Then his eye narrowed. "Kabuto," he murmured. Was Kabuto sent in case Naruto defeated Sasuke? He is going away. Kakashi doubled his pace and reached at the valley, looking down at a sight that nearly dropped him in relief and filled him up with dread. Sasuke was laid on the ground on his back, eyes closed. He looked peaceful, too peaceful actually. Then there was Naruto, who was sitting with his head resting on his hands. He dropped down and tentatively approached them, and only then he saw the seal on Sasuke's stomach. He relaxed a bit, knowing Naruto had put a seal on Sasuke to prevent him from escaping. He winced though, upon seeing the amount of abuse Sasuke's body had taken, no doubt by the hands of Naruto. "Naruto?" Flashback end. He gestured to Sasuke. "Is he?" Naruto nodded, "Unconscious, and will stay that way for quite a while." Kakashi gave a nod of understanding and looked around. The damage was enough to be visible. An entire section of the wall of the valley had been shattered to pieces. "I really thought you would have less trouble bringing him in, considering your knowledge of seals and Hiraishin." Naruto gave a snort and nodded. "I would have, but this was more than a mission for me. Both of us wanted to see where we stood in regard to each other." Kakashi raised an eyebrow, but remained silent. It was no secret to him that despite of being his superior, in terms of rank and power, Naruto shared a rivalry with Sasuke. It was mostly on Sasuke's part, but if there was one person in Konoha that Naruto wouldn't refuse to fight with all his power, it was Sasuke. The bond they shared was strange and rather ununderstandable. "And what have you found out?" A small smile appeared on Naruto's face, as if being reminded of a joke. "He still has a few ways to go." Kakashi could not help the snort that escaped him. "I can see that." Looking around, he found one thing out of place. "Where's Kabuto?" "Oh, he did come here to collect Sasuke, but I scared him away." The statement sounded completely absurd. The right-hand man of Orochimaru, scared away? Apparently, he still remembers the Rasengan it drove into his gut. That sounded believable. Anyone would keep their distance to avoid a repetition of that. Naruto frowned. "What happened to my team?" Kakashi shook his head. "I don't know. I really just came to stop the both of you from killing each other." Naruto nodded in understanding and stood up in a smooth movement. "I hope you don't mind carrying him, Kakashi. I am a bit tired, and in need of attention from my wife." Kakashi did not mind at all. In fact, he was ready to carry Naruto as well, should the blonde drop in exhaustion. But Naruto looked like he had barely been in a scuffle, unlike Sasuke. The guy could imitate a dead guy right now. Naruto flashed to all of his markers, collecting his kunai. He really should figure out a better way to do this, rather than flashing to everywhere. Unnecessary waste of chakra. Maybe he could summon them? A summoning contract for the Flying Thunder God? He filed that thought away for later. He came back to Kakashi and turned to him. "Let's go. Omake-1. Did you see that? He totally got that from me. In your face, Uchiha." Fugaku was really not in a good mood. Here he was, in heaven, with his wife, enjoying a quiet lunch, when he was informed that his son has deserted the village. Quickly, his wife and he rushed to their television, which allowed them to watch their sons every now and then. Surprisingly, he found the Yondaime Hokage and his wife at their house as well. Kushina, the ever-chippy Uzumaki, replied, "Both of our children are on the TV." Fugaku and Mikoto were horrified that Sasuke was going to Orochimaru of all people to gain power to kill Itachi. Mikoto looked ready to cry, and Fugaku hated the fact that he could do nothing but watch. But both of them were surprised when they learned that Kushina and Minato's son was in charge of the mission to bring Sasuke back. Ever since they had learned that Naruto had made Jonin, Kushina had been extremely proud and happy. So much that she took every opportunity to gloat about it. Minato did no such thing, but his eyes shined with pride every time the talk was about his son. Mikoto, his dear, sweet wife, took Kushina's gloating in stride, long used to her best friend's habits. But Fugaku never liked the fact that Naruto was the genius that was being compared to the likes of his father and his older son. Sasuke was always a bit too slow in his eyes. Maybe that came from having a genius for his older son. They all watched the fight between their sons with mixed expressions. Minato was unbearably smug of the fact that his son was capable of tricking and outspeeding the Sharingan. The fight came to the current point, where Naruto had executed the brilliant plan of punching Sasuke with the force of a freight train. Minato was shaking his head at his son's straightforwardness and lack of efficiency in the plan, but couldn't deny the results. If not for Orochimaru's seal, Sasuke would not have been able to get up again. But Kushina was all too happy to gloat. Even Fugaku couldn't deny that such a blunt plan could only have been thought up by someone who was related to Kushina. Then came the horror. Both the Uchiha, well, only Mikoto, but Fugaku was close, cried when they saw what their son had become. Even Kushina had tears in her eyes. Both the parents watched how Naruto was basically tossed around effortlessly by Sasuke for a while. Then Minato and Kushina cheered up on seeing the power of the Kyuubi coursing through their son. It was a literal smackdown after Naruto harnessed the Baijuwa chakra. Sasuke stood no chance at all. But the shock came when Minato, who was generally a very cool person, stood up and cheered. Yes. The reason for that was Naruto had used the Hiraishin in the same manner Minato had to take down the rogue Uchiha all those years ago. The irony of that statement was not lost on any of them. Kushina smiled wistfully when the TV switched off. "I guess he really is more of your son than mine." Minato, the ever-loving husband, wrapped an arm around his wife and kissed her cheek. "He is our son, Kushina. Not just mine, or yours, but ours." Kushina smiled and nodded. "And he really took my words to heart about finding a woman like me." Omaketu. Madara cursed as he handed over the money to Hashirama, who smiled goofily. As if there was any doubt. Madara scoffed at his rival's statement. "You were just lucky, Hashirama. I am beyond ashamed that my descendant needed foul power such as that to try and beat yours." Tobirama spoke up from behind them, approval lacing his tone. "Now that is what I call a good use of my jutsu." Madara glared at the white-haired Senju, who had turned his head and was innocently whistling. While you may think Tobirama was proud of Naruto's maneuver, Madara clearly knew that Tobirama only found joy in the fact that Naruto brought the wall down on an Uchiha. Madara turned away from both of them, watching the sun. It was only a matter of a few years before he was revived. Until then, he would have to endure, as painful as it was. That's it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and follow me on my other social media accounts. Anime God here, and I'm signing off.